First of all, I want to thank all of you who have turned in questions about my Amish neighbors. I appreciate that because that's a lot of times how I create my videos, because I want to give you information about my Amish neighbors that you're asking about. One of the questions that came up was, how do the Amish borrow money? Do they use banks? Do they use credit cards? Do they only use cash? So I'm going to talk about money today, some different facts about our Amish neighbors and how they go about buying a house and whether or not they use banks or not. I know myself, when I first started learning about the Amish, I honestly thought that they did everything with cash or they bartered, that they really stayed in that time period where they try to stay away from using any kind of lending, any kind of charge cards, checkbooks, any of that. And I'm going to answer those questions for you today. And I broke it down into 5 different questions, or 5 different areas I'm going to answer for you, just so you know what's coming up. First of all, whether or not do they borrow? Do Amish people borrow money? My second question I'll answer is, why would they borrow, right? Why? What do they borrow on, or what kind of items would they? And number 3 would be, how or where would they borrow if they do? Number 4, do they use credit cards? And number 5, do they use checkbooks? After I answer those 5 questions, I'm going to give you a bonus thing that I discussed with one of my Amish neighbors. Basically, we discussed digital currency and how that would affect the Amish. So definitely stick around for that. So number 1, I know I'm sounding redundant when I talk about this, but the Amish are broken up into different sects or different churches, and they're very small. It's usually 25 to 35 families per church group. I'm going to call them church groups. But the thing is, within all the Amish orders, you have your very more progressive, more liberal Amish. So they're going to kind of go with the times and take advantage of much of the things in life that they can, that are going to help them live. And then you have your very, very old Amish order, the Schwarzentrooper group, and they will not even have a phone around their house, or absolutely lots of the conveniences are not there. They're very much very conservative. So I did do a video on that. You can go ahead and watch that. If you click the link, it'll just open up another tab, and then you can go back and watch it later. But let's go with number 1. Do they borrow? And the answer is yes. But then again, it depends upon the different groups. I am more associated with the old order Amish. Most of the people that I talk to, we actually have a lot of Mennonite in our area and old order Amish, I noticed in general. That's the more prevalent. And they do borrow. But I also noticed that it's usually for businesses, because they need to borrow money to open up a business. They will borrow from family members if they can. I know some families that the father usually tries to help his children by letting them borrow from him so that they don't have to go into debt, because it's definitely something they don't want to do. The bank that I talked to said that typically, if they do borrow, they're not high risk. When they come to the bank and borrow money, they're known for being hard workers, and ethically they're known for paying off their debt, because that's just what they believe, that you should pay it off. Number 2, we just talked about that a little bit, but why would they borrow? And like I said, sometimes they may borrow to get a house. I know we've talked to one Amish young man. He was just freshly married, and when he first got married, he and his wife lived with their parents. And when he was working for his dad, as soon as they're at 14, they start working and they give all their money to their father. And then once they're married, they can start keeping their money. So he lived with his parents after he got married, and they saved money, and they had a very hefty down payment on a house. It was almost totally cash, but if he wanted something bigger, he could go to the bank and would have no problem getting it. So that would definitely be one of the reasons some people come in and borrow money for a horse and buggy. Horses are expensive for a good one, and then for business expenses. Around here, many of our Amish neighbors will do things like gutters on houses. They will do roofing. There's also produce companies. There's number 3, how and where do they borrow? Most banks in my community will lend them money. Like I said, they do go to the bank. The thing, though, is the collateral. It's interesting that a lot of times when you or I borrow money, we have a credit score. We have to come up with some kind of collateral. Somebody has to sign for us. Again, basically, most Amish, their collateral is their character, because they're from an Amish home. A lot of times maybe their parents, their father had gone in to borrow, and it just kind of, that credit does follow the children just because they're known for paying back their loans, and they're actually known for paying them back as fast as they can. They typically won't wait that 30 years. So do they use credit cards? None of the Amish that I have met or talked to do, but definitely you probably would come across a progressive Amish person that probably does. I have not met any myself, but that doesn't mean they're not out there. And last, do they use checkbooks? And absolutely, every Amish person that I've seen, I've even seen them shopping at the general store, they either pay cash or they do use checkbooks. About a month ago, I went in to talk with one of my Amish neighbors, and I was just, it just kind of hit me, like, we're looking at the news and everything, and it talks about, the world becoming digital money, getting rid of cash and things like that. And I started thinking, what would the Amish do? Because typically, like I said, they typically don't use credit cards. They use cash and they use checkbooks. So I did interview, or kind of as a conversation, we weren't really interviewing, but I did ask one of my neighbors, have you thought about that? You have a business here. Would the Amish community go back to cash only? And he told me, he said, most businesses couldn't do that because a lot of the Amish, when they have a business, let's say to do roofing or gutters, they're doing that work for English. And so when they go to get paid from the English, if we have a digital economy, then they would have to be paid with digital money. And that would present a problem right now, the way the rule stands. And I found that interesting. And he did look at me and he was like, I never even thought about that could put some people out of business. So I had even asked, I said, well, would you guys just service each other and only barter and only use cash? And that's when he said it's almost impossible. He goes, a lot of the Amish now rely on the English for some of their work and some of their income. I mean, even when they have their produce auctions, we've had trucks come in from Indiana, from out of state, with semis coming into our produce auctions, bidding on the produce and taking it back to another state. So it's huge. A lot of their income is dependent on the English. So I found that interesting. Really, that's a question for all of us. How will our lives change if that happens, if everything goes to digital? And that's yet to be seen, isn't it? So once again, you have learned that the Amish will use some of our conveniences, but they're limited in what they can do. It is kind of hard to be in our culture and not be able to contact other people, take advantage of some of the things we have, and still stay to yourself. And I know they try to do that the best that they can. The biggest thing is they don't want to be dependent on these services that are available, and they stay away from it as much as they can. I hope this answered your question, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video. Don't forget to subscribe, give me a thumbs up, ask those questions below. I'm so happy to answer them for you. You have a blessed day.